Montana Territory, June 1877. The sun was barely over the pines when Josie Rawlins raised her Winchester and fired a clean shot straight through the neck of a charging buck, dropping it just feet from where her line traps curved around the hill. She did not flinch at the sound, did not breathe heavy. She just watched it fall, then turned back toward the cabin without a word. 4 years alone had taught her to be quiet, and not waste a second on what could not be fixed. The Rawlins homestead sat 30 miles outside of Miles City, tucked between cottonwoods and the slow bend of the Tongue River. Her father had built it before the war, before he rode off and never came back. Her mother died the winter Josie turned 19. That spring, her husband took their 2-year-old son and vanished, left behind only a note that said, "I can't do this." Josie never found them. She had not spoken to a soul in over 2 months. So when a lone cowboy rode up the dirt track toward her fence line that afternoon, dust clinging to his coat and a tired sway to his shoulders, Josie's hand went to her rifle again. She stepped out to meet him, boots crunching dry underbrush, her face unreadable. The man dismounted slow. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and respectful, "do not mean to startle you. My horse threw a shoe back near the ridge. I was hoping for a bit of water, and maybe a fire to fix the iron." Josie did not lower the rifle. "That horse does not look lame," he nodded once. "I walked the last mile." Did not want to press her. He had a way of standing still, like he was waiting on the wind. His hat shaded a strong jaw, dark hair curling at the edge, and eyes the color of dry wheat fields, flat and golden but not unkind. "You from around here?" she asked. "No, ma'am, came up from Wyoming." "Name's Orren Grady." Josie's eyes narrowed. "That is a long ride." "I am looking for work, maybe land one day, just trying to keep moving forward." She studied him a moment longer, then slowly lowered the barrel. "You can water the horse," she said. "There is a trough behind the barn." "But I do not take in strangers." Orren nodded again, no judgment in his face. "Thank you." He led his mare to the trough, moving with a quiet patience that struck her. Not many men knew how to be still, fewer knew how to stay soft with animals. She watched him from the porch, arms crossed, until he finished. "I could fix your broken gate hinge for the favor," he offered, glancing back at her. "That hinge has not been right in 3 years," Josie muttered. "You know iron?" "I do." She hesitated, then nodded toward the forge behind the shed. "Coal bin's half full, tools are rusted, do not break anything." He cracked a tired grin. "Yes, ma'am." By nightfall, Orren had fixed the hinge, shored up the post it hung on, and rebalanced her gate so it no longer dragged. Josie watched from the porch, silent as the stars began to blink through the dark. He did not ask to stay. He rolled out his bedroll by the barn, tucked in near the wall where the wind would not cut so hard. Josie ate her supper of stew and hard bread alone, but that night she could not sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the rafters above her bed pale in the moonlight. His voice had been calm. His hands had been careful. He had not asked her questions. That was what unsettled her most. She got up and checked the barn window. He was still there. Sleeping soundly, arms crossed over his chest, cowboy hat pulled low. The next morning, he was already up and splitting kindling when she opened the door. "You planning to keep fixing things?" she asked. He kept his eyes on the wood. "If I can be of use." Josie looked at the pile already forming. "I have not had a fire pile that tall in years." Orren wiped sweat from his brow. "Then I will keep going." He stayed 3 days. In that time, he fixed the hen coop latch, replaced a missing shutter, and helped her dig a new trench for water runoff behind the barn. He never asked her name. Never came closer than he needed to. At night, he slept outside, and Josie never invited him in, but something shifted on the 4th day. They were working on the fence line, mending a spot where the boards had rotted out. The sun was high, the sweat soaking into their shirts. Orren passed her a nail and their fingers brushed. Josie flinched. He did not move away for a moment. She just stared at him, at the scar above his temple, the line of his throat, the quiet in his eyes. "You do not know me," she said. "No," he replied. "But I see you." She dropped her gaze and turned back to the fence. That night she brought him a plate of stew and a roll. She set it on the porch without a word and went back inside. By the 7th day he was still there. she found herself listening for his voice in the morning. Watching the way he tucked his shirt sleeves, how he always left half his bread for the barn cat. She started leaving extra stew in the pot without asking why, and on the 8th night when a storm rolled in, she opened the door and said, "There is a cot in the back room. You can take it if you want." He looked at her, rain already slicking his shoulders. "Thank you." He never stepped past the kitchen, but that night Josie sat across from him with her tea and said, "My name is Josie Rawlins." Orren looked up and nodded once. "It is good to meet you, Josie." The next morning, her world cracked open. She was heading to the spring when she saw movement near the river bend. A small figure, thin, barefoot, wrapped in a threadbare shawl. Josie ran. The girl was no older than 6. Dirty, shaking, and too light in her arms when Josie scooped her up. She had deep brown eyes and a crooked scar across her cheek. She clutched Josie's shirt and whispered, "My name's Zadie." "A man had left her behind," she said. "Took her brother and never came back." Josie's blood went cold. Orren was at her side in seconds. He crouched low, looking Zadie in the eye. "You are safe now," he said. "We will take care of you." Josie could barely breathe. She had seen the look in Zadie's eyes before. It was the same look her son had when he cried for his father before he disappeared. Before Josie lost everything, she held Zadie close, heart pounding, and Orren reached out not to fix, not to question, but to steady her. Josie did not pull away, not this time, not from him. Zadie wouldn't let go of Josie's hand, even as the morning warmed and the storm-washed silence settled over the land. Her little fingers curled tight, and when Josie moved to pour water into a basin for washing, she felt the tug again. "All right, sweetheart," Josie said softly. "You stay as close as you need." The child's cheeks were flushed from sun and fear, her feet scraped raw. Josie knelt beside her, dipping a cloth into the cool water and beginning to clean the small cuts along her ankles. Zadie winced but didn't cry. Behind them, Orren stepped through the open doorway carrying a folded rag and a tin of salve. He didn't speak, just held them out to Josie and returned to the corner where he'd been whittling a piece of pine earlier, his eyes steady on the window. Josie hadn't asked him to stay in the house after the storm passed, but he hadn't left either. Zadie watched him carefully. "Is he a sheriff?" "No," Josie said, brushing dirt from the girl's knees. "Just a quiet man with a good horse." "Does he live here?" Josie paused, then glanced across the room. "He's helping fix things." Orren's mouth tugged, but he didn't look up. Zadie lowered her voice. "He looks like he could lift a bear." Josie's lips twitched, but she kept her expression even. "Let's not test it." Later, while Zadie slept curled under a quilt on the cot, Josie stepped outside. Orren was already on the porch, sharpening a drawknife with slow, even strokes. The scent of juniper drifted on the breeze from the ridge. "She needs shoes," Josie said. "I noticed. I've got a few coins put by. I can ride into town tomorrow." "I could go," he offered without looking up. "If you'd rather stay." Josie crossed her arms. "She might wake looking for me. She trusts you." "She doesn't know me. She knows enough." Josie leaned against the post, the sun casting long shadows across the yard. "You ever see a child left behind like that before?" "Once, in Kansas. Tornado took the barn down on her folks. Neighbor found her 2 days later." Josie let that settle between them. After a moment, she said her brother's name was Ali, said her pa took him and never came back. Orren stood, sliding the blade into its sheath. "You think it's the same man?" "I don't know. But I can't stop wondering." His gaze didn't drift. "I'll stay till we find out, if you'll have me." She didn't answer right away. The wind picked up, brushing her braid against her shoulder. "You sleep inside now," she said finally. "We've got an extra blanket." That night, she left the door between the rooms cracked open. Zadie's breathing was soft and even. Josie lay awake longer than she meant to, listening for any sound that might mean someone was coming to take the girl back. But nothing came except the wind and the quiet rustle of cottonwoods. By morning, Zadie was up before either of them, sitting at the table with a spoon in each hand. "I can help stir," she declared. Josie handed her the cornmeal and smiled. "Then we'll have the fluffiest cakes this side of the river." Orren stepped in from outside, brushing dust from his shoulders. He looked at the little girl, then at Josie, and for the first time since he'd arrived, his eyes softened in a way she hadn't seen. "Town's 30 miles," he said. "We'll need a list." Josie handed him a folded scrap of paper. Already written, he took it, tucked it into his coat. "I'll leave after breakfast, be back by dusk tomorrow." Zadie looked up. "Will you bring peppermint drops, if they've got any left in the jar?" Josie watched the ease between them. She couldn't remember the last time someone had offered her help without expecting anything back. She didn't know what to do with it, only that it settled something restless in her. When Orren rode off, she stood on the porch with Zadie beside her. The girl waved, and Josie raised a hand slowly. The sun climbed high, and the day wore on. Josie spent the afternoon teaching Zadie how to boil water for laundry and wrap twine for drying herbs. The girl had careful hands and a quiet determination that reminded her of the boy she'd once held at the edge of a summer field, his small shoulders resting against her chest. She didn't speak his name. Not out loud, not yet. That night, Zadie curled against her in the bed, fingers twisted into Josie's sleeve. "He won't come back for me," the girl whispered. Josie pressed a hand to her hair. "Then we'll stay right here." In the quiet, she let herself believe it was true. That maybe this time someone had come not to leave but to stay, and maybe, just maybe, she was ready to let him. Orren returned near dusk, as promised, his mare's gait slow but steady, the saddlebags packed full. Dust clung to the hem of his coat and the brim of his hat, and he carried the scent of pine smoke and trained steel, the kind that floated around the edges of town. Josie met him at the gate, her apron still damp from scrubbing Zadie's skirt in the basin. She didn't speak right away, just opened the latch so he could lead the mare through. "They had peppermint," he said, pulling a small muslin pouch from his coat pocket. Josie took it with a nod. "She'll be glad. She's been watching the road since noon." He handed her the rest cloth rolls, a spool of thread, boots small enough for a 6-year-old's feet, a new tin cup with blue enamel flaking at the rim. "I traded for the boots," he said. "With what?" "Sharpened a man's plow blade." "Took an hour." Josie glanced at the boots, then at him. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the porch, calling, "Zadie." The girl's head appeared behind the door frame, eyes wide, bare feet thudding across the boards. She stopped a few paces from Orren, glancing up at him, then at the package in Josie's hands. Josie crouched and unwrapped the cloth. "For you." The child's face lit up as she took the boots, cradling them like something fragile. "They smell like leather," she whispered. Josie helped her slip them on. They were stiff but a good fit. Zadie rose to her feet, walking a few steps across the yard, then turning to show them. "See, I can run now." Orren tipped his hat. "You'll be faster than a jackrabbit." That night, Josie set 3 places at the table. Orren hesitated when he stepped inside, but she met his eyes and said, "You're not eating out there anymore." He washed his hands in the basin, then took the seat across from her. Zadie sat between them, humming softly as she spooned up beans and wild onion. The lantern flickered, casting shadows on the plank walls. Midway through the meal, Josie set her fork down. "You said you came up from Wyoming." Orren looked up. "That's right." "What pushed you north?" He rested an elbow on the table, not defensive, just thoughtful. "There was a ranch near Sweetwater. I worked there 4 years. The owner died last winter and his kin sold it off in pieces. Nothing left to stay for." Josie studied him. "No family of your own?" "None that stayed." He didn't explain further and she didn't press. Zadie leaned into Josie's side, her eyes drooping. "Let's get you to bed," Josie murmured, lifting the girl into her arms. When she returned, Orren was on the porch again, seated on the top step, his coat draped over one knee. The stars were sharp above, scattered like salt across black velvet. She sat beside him without a word. After a long moment, he said, "You've made a place here, strong, quiet. Most folks would have given up." "I almost did," she said. He nodded, as if he'd known that already. She watched the sky a while. "I used to think if I kept everything in order, chopped wood stacked, floors swept, fences mended, then nothing else could fall apart. Did it help? Some. Not enough." The wind stirred the grass. He didn't speak for some time, then said, "I don't know what you've lost. But I can see what you've held on to." She folded her hands. It's harder to let someone in than to keep them out. I won't ask you to open anything you're not ready to, she turned to him. But you're here. I am. The porch creaked beneath them. He shifted, not closer but no farther away. She could feel the warmth of him, not pressing, just steady. I don't expect anything, she said. Neither do I. A long silence passed between them, not awkward, not empty. Then she said, you could stay. He looked at her, brow furrowed slightly, not in disbelief, but like he was weighing the shape of the words. I'd like that, he said. She nodded once, then rose. There's a shed behind the barn. We can clear a space for you until we figure out more. He stood with her. Whatever's needed. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes had softened. The sharp edge she carried had dulled, just slightly, worn down by the steady presence of a man who hadn't tried to fix her, only walked beside her. Inside, she tucked the blanket tighter around Zadie and stood for a moment by the cot. The girl's breathing was even, her new boots lined neatly beneath the bed. Josie glanced toward the door, where the light from the porch still spilled in faintly. She'd told herself no one could get through the walls she'd built. But maybe, just maybe, someone had found the door. The shed behind the barn had once held seed sacks and broken tack, but by the next evening, Orren had swept it out, laid a wool blanket over a straw mattress, and set his saddlebags in the corner. Josie brought him a tin lantern and a folded quilt. She didn't say anything more than what was needed, but her hands lingered a moment longer than necessary when she handed him the light. He didn't speak of it, but he noticed. The days eased into rhythm. Orren repaired the barn roof plank by plank while Josie tended the smokehouse and taught Zadie how to stretch dough for biscuits. The girl had a sharp eye for corners and edges, and Josie found herself handing over tasks she'd guarded for years. She didn't explain why. She just let it happen. One afternoon, Josie returned from the far field with a bushel of chokecherries and found Orren teaching Zadie how to braid rawhide. She's got good fingers for it, he said, nodding toward the even rows lining the strip. Josie set the basket down. You'd best be careful. She'll outwork you soon. Zadie grinned, missing a tooth. That night after the girl had fallen asleep, curled around her corn-husk doll, Josie stepped onto the porch. Orren was there, as he always was after supper, whittling a length of pine into a smooth curve. She leaned against the rail, arms folded. You always carve the same way, he glanced up. I like the feel of it. You don't have to think too hard when your hands are busy. Josie reached for the finished piece beside him. It was small and unfinished horse, its legs slender but strong. You ever plan to make the rest? I never had a reason to. She turned it in her hands. You do now, he met her gaze. That's so, she didn't look away. Zadie said she wants a whole herd. Orren's mouth lifted, barely. Then I'd best get to work. Neither of them sat. The space between them was quiet but not distant. A wind passed low through the cottonwoods and a nightjar called once from the river bend. Josie's voice dropped low. I need to ask you something. All right. When you were in town, did you hear about any men traveling with a boy? Around 5 or 6, fair-haired, Orren's jaw shifted. I asked around. A few folks remembered a man heading east with a child, but the details were thin. No names. She didn't respond at first, then I figured as much. I'll keep asking. Her arms tightened across her chest. I don't know what I'd do if I found them. You don't have to decide that yet. She moved to sit on the top step, resting her elbows on her knees. I used to think if I ever saw them again, I'd scream or shoot him, but now I think I'd just ask why. Orren sat beside her. Some men don't have answers worth hearing, but you deserve to ask. She looked down at her hands, the backs weathered from years of sun and soil. You ever lose someone you didn't expect to? He didn't hesitate. My older brother, we fought over nothing. He left for Texas and never came back. She nodded slowly. You carry it, every mile. Their shoulders brushed, neither of them pulling away. When Josie rose, she didn't go inside right away. Instead, she reached for the lantern he'd left beside the post and lit it with a match from her apron pocket. The glow caught the edge of her cheekbone, the curve of her mouth. You'll need this in the shed, she said. He stood and took it from her, fingers grazing hers. She didn't flinch. He said, Good night, Josie. Her voice was quiet. Good night, Orren. The door clicked shut behind her, but she stood just beyond it for a long while, listening to the soft crunch of his footsteps in the dry grass, the creak of the shed door, the whisper of wind across the ridge. And when she finally turned to the quiet house, she realized something had shifted, small but certain. The kind of change that couldn't be undone, not by silence and not by fear. The frost came early that autumn, curling along the fence posts before the sun had a chance to melt it. Josie woke to the brittle hush of it, the kind that settled over the land like a reminder not everything survived the cold. But when she looked across the room and saw Zadie still asleep, a quilt pulled up to her chin, she felt a warmth that held against the air. Downstairs, Orren had already brought in wood, the smell of fresh split pine threading through the kitchen. He was at the stove, coaxing the fire along with the same quiet care he showed to every task. She watched him from the stairs for a moment, unseen, and didn't feel the usual press of solitude in her chest. He turned as she stepped onto the floorboards. "There's coffee ready," he said. "I left out the sugar tin for her." Josie nodded, reaching for the tin cup already waiting. "She likes to stir it herself, says it makes it taste more like candy. She's got her own ideas, that one." Josie set the cup down. "She asked if you'd teach her to ride." His brow lifted. "She's still small." "I told her you'd start with walking the horse, nothing more." He rinsed his hands in the basin. "I'll saddle the mare this afternoon." She hesitated. "That horse yours?" "It was my brother's. He gave her to me when he left." Josie leaned against the counter. "You never said he gave you anything." There wasn't much to say until now. She looked at him across the soft light of morning. "You don't talk unless it matters." "I talk when someone's listening." She didn't look away. "I'm listening." The kettle began to whistle, sharp and sudden. Orren moved to lift it, and the moment passed, but something of it lingered. Later that day, Josie set Zadie on the mare's back and walked beside her while Orren held the reins. The child beamed, the wind catching her hair as she sat tall in the saddle. Josie kept her hand ready, but Orren's grip never wavered. "She's not afraid," Josie said as they reached the end of the pasture. "She trusts you," he replied. Josie glanced at him. "And you?" "I trust what I see." That night, after Zadie was asleep and the lantern turned low, Josie stepped out to the porch where Orren sat sharpening his knife. She didn't sit, just stood in the doorway. "She asked if you were going to marry me." He paused the blade. "And what did you tell her?" "I said I hadn't decided yet." He set the knife down. "Not because I don't want to," she continued. "Because I've spent too long not knowing what I needed." He stood, brushing his hands on his trousers. "And now," she stepped toward him, "now I know." He waited. "I need someone who won't leave," she said, "and someone who doesn't need to fix what hurts." "I'm not going anywhere, Josie." She reached for his hand. "Then stay, not in the shed, not just for the work, stay for us." He took her hand gently, fingers warm and solid. "I've been hoping you'd ask." She didn't kiss him right away. She stood close, her breath soft against his collar, and let her forehead rest against his chest. He held her there, no rush, no ask, just the quiet knowing of two people who had waited long enough. They married on a Sunday, under the cottonwoods at the edge of the pasture. Zadie wore a wreath of dried wildflowers on her head and held the rings in her palm as if they were made of gold. Josie wore her mother's shawl, and Orren came to her not with vows written down but with hands calloused from the work of staying. After the words were spoken, they returned to the house together, the three of them, and shared bread and sweet tea by the fire. That winter, Orren built a second room onto the house with windows that faced east, so the light would come in first thing each day. Josie filled its shelves with jars and herbs, and Zadie kept her dolls tucked under the cot in the corner. They never found the man who left Zadie behind, and they never needed to. The girl stopped asking after a while. What she had now was fuller than the questions she once carried. By spring, the land had softened, and so had Josie. Her laugh came easier. She no longer counted the hours between chores to keep the silence at bay. And sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the porch cooled with shadow, she'd lean into Orren's side, his arm loose around her waist, and they'd sit without speaking as the sky turned gold. In time, folks from town started to visit more often. A neighbor brought over a new foal, and Josie taught a woman downriver how to dry elderberries for fever tonic. Zadie learned to read from the old primer Josie had kept wrapped in oilcloth under the stairs, and Orren carved her a shelf for her growing stack of books. There were still hard days. Fences to mend, storms that rattled the shutters, nights when the wind howled like grief. But Josie no longer faced them alone, and when Orren took her hand beneath the covers or when Zadie curled against her side after a dream, she understood something she hadn't before. Love wasn't the absence of pain. It was the place you returned to after surviving it, and this was home. Always would be.